I've done a lot of things in my 75 years that I'm not proud of, but there is one thing, one shadow that follows me every time I close my eyes that I can ever outrun. They say blood is thicker than water, but I found out the hard way that greed is thicker than both. If you stay with me until the end of this story, you might just see a piece of yourself in my mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, it'll save you from the hell I live in every day. Before I pour my heart out, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me, but because the truth is a rare thing these days. And I've got plenty more of it to share. It all started back in the summer of '84. I had a wife named Martha and two boys who thought I hung the moon. We didn't have much, just a small house with a porch that creaked and a yard full of weeds, but we had peace, or at least they did inside me. There was a hunger. It wasn't a hunger for food, it was a hunger for more. I looked at the neighbors with their shiny new cars and their fancy clothes, and I felt like a failure. I felt like a small man. I worked at the local mill, breaking my back for pennies, while my brother, Silas, was out in the city making a name for himself. Silas was always the golden boy. He had the touch. Everything he did turned to profit. One evening, Silas came by the house. He looked tired, older than his years. He told me he'd found a way for us both to get rich, but it required a bit of a gamble. He needed a cosigner for a massive loan to start a new venture, and he needed someone he could trust. I should have said no. I should have looked at Martha and the boys and realized I already had everything I needed, but that hunger in my gut screamed louder than my conscience. I didn't just sign those papers for Silas. I did something much worse. I went behind his back and I changed the terms. I made it so if the business failed, I would walk away clean, and Silas, my own flesh and blood, would lose everything he owned, including the family land our daddy left us. I told myself I was just protecting my own. I told myself it was business, but deep down I knew I was setting a trap for my own brother. I didn't know then that the trap would eventually snap shut on my own soul. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was finally becoming a big man. I had no idea that I was about to set my entire life on fire, and I'd be the one holding the match. For a few months, I lived in a kind of fever dream. Silas was working 18 hours a day, pouring every ounce of his soul into that business. I'd see him on Sundays, his hands covered in grease and his eyes bloodshot, and he'd smile at me and say, "We're almost there, brother. Just a few more weeks and we'll be on top of the world." I'd smile back, but I couldn't look him in the eye. I had that secret tucked away in my heart like a loaded gun, and the safety was off. I was waiting for a windfall, but I was standing on a foundation of dry rot. Then the winter hit, and it hit hard. The market shifted, and the demand for what Silas was building just evaporated overnight. I remember the day he called me. His voice was shaking. He said the bank was calling in the debt, and he didn't have the cash. He told me not to worry, that he'd find a way to keep my name out of it. He was still trying to protect me, even as his world was falling apart. That's the kind of man Silas was. He was a builder. I was a wrecker. I just didn't know it yet. When the man in suits finally came, they didn't go to Silas' office. They came to the old family farm, our daddy's place. The place where we grew up, running through the corn rows and catching fireflies in jars. I stood on that porch and watched them hammer a sign into the dirt. It said foreclosure. Martha asked me what was happening, her voice small and scared. I told her it was Silas's fault. I lied to my wife, the woman who shared my bed and my heart. I told her Silas had been reckless, that he'd gambled away our heritage. I made him the villain so I could keep playing the victim. I watched Silas lose his house, his car, and his dignity. He came to me begging for a place to stay just for a month while he got back on his feet. And do you know what I did? I turned him away. I told him I couldn't risk my family's safety by bringing his bad luck into our home. I stood behind my screen door and watched my brother walk down the driveway with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. I had the money to help him. I had the means to save that farm. But if I helped him, the truth about those papers might come out. So I chose my secret over my brother. I chose my comfort over his life. And that was just the beginning of the rot. It started in my bank account, but it was moving fast toward my soul. Have you ever looked at your own reflection and realized the person looking back is a complete stranger? That's what happened to me when the money started coming in. I was living a life that didn't belong to me, paid for with a currency that wasn't mine. If you're still with me, you're about to see how a single lie can turn a happy home into a prison. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. You need to hear how this ends, so you never make the same choice as I did. Success is a funny thing when you buy it with someone else's life, And for a while, I thought I'd won with Silas gone and the bank settled. I had a little extra in my pocket. I bought Martha a new stove and the boys shiny new bicycles. I thought if I filled the house with new things, the old ghosts wouldn't have anywhere to sit, but I was wrong. Silence has a way of getting louder the more you try to drown it out. The boys would ask, Dad, where's Uncle Silas? Why doesn't he come for Sunday dinner? I'd tell them he was busy. I'd tell them he moved far away. I'd watch them ride those bikes, and all I could see was the dust from Silas's car as he drove away that last time. They'd look at me with those big, trusting eyes, and it felt like they were looking right through my skin at the black spot on my heart. Martha was a smart woman. She didn't say much, but she watched me. She watched how I jumped when the phone rang or how I couldn't sit still in church. She'd place her hand on mine, and her skin felt like fire. I felt like a thief in my own home, eating food I hadn't earned and sleeping in a bed built on betrayal. One night, 2 years later, a letter came. It was from a lawyer. Silas had been working in a coal yard and there had been an accident. He was in the hospital with no way to pay the bills. The letter said that as his next of kin, I was being notified. I held that paper and my fingers shook. Martha saw me and asked what it was. I had a choice. I could have told her everything, the papers, the bank, the farm, the lie, but I didn't. I crumpled that letter and threw it into the fireplace. I told her it was just junk mail. I watched the flames lick that paper until it turned to ash. I stood there and watched my brother's last cry for help burn to nothing. In that moment, I realized I was a monster. I was a man who would rather let his brother rot than admit he was wrong. I thought I was protecting my life, but I was really just building my own coffin. The air in that house started to feel thin. I was rich in the pocket, but I was becoming a beggar in my own soul. They say a secret is like a poison. It doesn't just kill the person who takes it, it seeps into the ground and kills everything around them. You might think you can hide what you've done, but the earth has a way of talking. If you're still with me, you're about to hear how the walls finally came tumbling down on the life I built. Before we get to the moment that changed everything, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the final lesson I had to learn the hard way, and I want to make sure you're here for the ending. About a month after I watched that letter turn to ash in my fireplace, the phone rang in the dead of night. Martha answered it in the kitchen. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. I knew when she came back into the room, she didn't turn on the light. She just sat on the edge of the mattress and made a sound I will never forget. It was a low, broken moan, like a wounded animal. Silas was gone. He died in a cold hospital bed with no one to hold his hand. He died thinking his only brother didn't care enough to even say goodbye. The funeral was the hardest day of my life. I had to stand there in a black suit, bought with money I'd stolen from him, and listen to people talk about what a good man Silas was. I had to watch my two boys cry for the uncle who used to give them rides on his shoulders. Every time someone shook my hand and told me they were sorry for my loss, I felt like a murderer. I hadn't pulled the trigger, but I dot pulled the rug out from under him and watched him fall until there was nothing left. The real end began a week later. Martha was cleaning out the fireplace, and she found it a tiny charred corner of the letter I tried to burn. It had Silas's name on it and the name of that hospital. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just walked into the living room where I was sitting and laid that scrap of ash on my lap. She looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw that she finally saw me. Not the man she loved, but the man I really was. I tried to tell her I did it for us, for the boys, for our future, but she just shook her head. She told me the man she married would have lived in a tent before he let his brother die alone. That night, she moved her things into the guest room. The silence that followed wasn't like the quiet of a peaceful night. It was the silence of a grave. My sons started avoiding me. They didn't know the whole truth yet, but they could smell the rot. I had all the money I wanted, but I was the loneliest man on God's earth. And the worst part was, I deserved every bit of it. I had traded my soul for a few extra dollars, and now the bill was finally coming due. You've stuck with me this far, and I reckon that means you're looking for a way to make sense of the mess I've made. This is the final chapter, the part where the fire I started finally burned down everything I loved. If you haven't joined our community yet, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building something real here, a place where the truth actually matters, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Now, let me tell you how it all ended. The silence in that house didn't just stay in the guest room. It spread like a cold fog through the hallways and into the kitchen and even out into the yard. My boys, who used to jump on me the second I walked through the door, started looking at the floor when I walked by. They were teenagers then, and teenagers have a way of smelling a lie better than any bloodhound. Martha eventually told them she didn't do it to be mean. She did it because she couldn't let them grow up thinking their father was a hero when I was really a thief. I remember my oldest, Davy, looking at me one morning over breakfast. He didn't ask for a new bike. He didn't ask for a ride to school. He just asked, Dad, was Uncle Silas really that bad, or were you just that scared? I didn't have an answer. I just sat there with my coffee going cold, feeling the weight of 20 years of lies pressing down on my shoulders. Martha stayed until the boys graduated. The day the youngest left for college, she had her bags packed before the car even pulled out of the driveway. She didn't ask for the money. She didn't ask for the house. She just said, I can't live in a graveyard anymore, Matthew. And then she walked out, and I watched her taillights fade into the night, and I knew she wasn't coming back. Now I'm 75 years old. I live in a big house with fine furniture and a bank account that most folks would envy. But you know what I don't have? I don't have a single person to call me on my birthday. I don't have a son who wants my advice. I don't have a wife to hold my hand when the nights get long and the shadows get tall. Every dollar I have is a reminder of a man I let die in the cold. Every room in this house is an echo of a family tore apart because I wanted to be a big man. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this old fool story, it's this. You can always make more money. You can always buy a faster car or a bigger house, but you can never, ever buy back your soul once you've sold it. And you can never unbreak a heart that you've shattered with a lie. Don't trade your people for paper. Don't trade your peace for a pile of gold. Because at the end of the day, when the sun goes down and you're all alone with your thoughts, the only thing that matters is who you loved and who loved you back. I failed that test. I pray to God you don't. Thank you for listening to an old man's regrets. It's the only thing I have left to give. That concludes the final part of your script.